Welcome everyone to the Unboxing Careers Podcast. I am your host, Greg Zakowicz. Have you ever wondered what it's like to be a career as a professional writer? You're about to find out what it's like. But before we do, be sure to like, rate, review, and share the podcast. And as a reminder, the next time you need a gift, visit thoughtfulcollection.com, your one-stop shop for thoughtful gifts that show you care. It's thoughtfulcollection.com. All right, I'd like to welcome to the show Jason Brick, professional writer of all sorts of stuff, which we will certainly get into today. So Jason, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Greg. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right, let's start with this. I would normally ask like current role experience. Let's talk about maybe, I'm going to get into like how you got into writing as a career here, but give us a little rundown about like types of stuff you have written to this point.
So when folks ask me what I write, what I tell them is I write what people will pay me to write. I like to eat food. I like to sleep indoors. I don't like having a real job. And freelance writing, although it's a lot of work, it's the parameters for having a real job, quote unquote real job of having to be a particular place at a particular time. That just doesn't let me be the dad that I want to be, the husband I want to be. And that location independence, that time independence has meant that I've never missed a soccer game. I never missed a play. I coached my oldest son's wrestling team and my youngest son's chess team. I was able to take them abroad for a year at a time twice. So I guess that's the answer there.
There we go. Do you have, so give us an idea about some of the outlets. So we're talking magazines, we're talking books, we're talking media,
all of the
type stuff.
All of the above. And it's changed over the 15 years that I've been doing this professionally. It started with a lot of web copy, words on websites for businesses, starting with small businesses that I knew and then going out to small businesses that knew people that I had worked for. A lot of corporate blogging before AI kind of took that over. Magazine articles, website articles, ghostwritten articles, and book-length ghostwriting projects. I do a lot of work in the tabletop role-playing game sphere because that's one of my hobbies, and so I get to go write for that as well. Pretty much anything anybody will pay me to write, I'll do. I have a couple of lines that I draw, but mostly I just want to feed my family.
I will circle back to the AI thing later as long as I don't forget. So remind me if we're wrapping up here and I don't talk about AI in the whole context of writing here, but I'm going to save that for right now. Let's circle back to your younger days. Have you always wanted to be a writer? Was writing something that you've always had an interest in and didn't know it was a career? Like walk us through kind of when you knew and then your progression, like how'd you get into it at that point?
Well, it's a funny story. One of my very earliest memories is thinking up stories in my head and scribbling lines on paper, pretending I was writing before I had learned how to write. When I was 4 years old, I took a coloring book and poked holes in the dots, a dot-to-dot book, and poked holes in the dots and used that as a kind of template to make a children's book. By posing the different dinosaurs in it in different places. And it was a story about a Tyrannosaurus that bit the head off a Triceratops and had a tummy ache because of the horns. And I got a lot of attention as a child as being writing pretty well. So I got some poetry that was accepted into things very early. In high school, I had two best friends. One of their dads was a New York Times best-selling nonfiction author, and the other one's mom was a technical writer. When I was in college, I was told by my professors that I could write professionally. And so, of course, I went into an entirely different career for the entirety of my 20s.
So when you were in college, what were you studying? Were you studying literature? Were you studying...
Psychology with a minor in English. And and I went into martial arts and security for 10, 15 years just because I was being contrary, I guess. And yeah.
Oh, I was going to say, why psychology?
Mostly because I thought it would make me a better analyzer of people I was protecting or protecting people from. I was really bought into the martial arts thing there for a long time. Ended up running a martial arts school for about 8 years. And what happened then was my oldest son became 7, and running a martial arts school is an evenings and weekends job. And 6 months of not seeing my kid, I realized that this didn't let me be the dad I wanted to be. So I sold my school. And because of that, I guess, talent for writing. I had been spending that entire time writing my own ad copy. I had some articles in Black Belt magazine by that point. I had a recurring column in the local paper about fitness and security. And I was able to take that portfolio I had built and turn it around into a freelance writing job relatively quickly. And then,
Okay. And sorry to jump in there. Approximately what age? I mean, you could be protective of your age you want, but approximately what age were you when you made that pivot from martial arts over to
mid-30s?
Okay.
Yeah. Mid-30s with 2 kids.
Very good. Okay, so you go to school for psychology.
Mm-hmm.
Did you pursue careers in that after you got out of school? Because I know you said you were told in college that you could do this as a career. So maybe that's a better way to ask this. What change did that make in your studies? And then what did you do immediately after school?
So somewhere during college, I just got really bit by the martial arts bug. And I started to compete. I wanted to have a life in that area. And the psychology degree was to help me do some parts of that better. Did a little bit of bodyguard work, did a little bit of bouncing work so that I didn't have student loans, that kind of thing. And went immediately from that to working in a martial arts school in the same town. And just kind of followed that path out to finally opening my own school, et cetera, and then realizing it wasn't what I fully wanted it to be.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. And then you said you were writing ad copy, you had a column in the paper, right? So you always had this sense of writing there, and then you look in and go, okay, I could probably just do this. And you start collecting clients, things like that.
Yeah.
If you were kind of going back and doing it all over again, right? Or maybe this is just advice for someone who's kind of going into being like, I love writing. When people think about writing, they think of either books, short stories, like the glamorous type stuff. They don't think of ad copy and SEO driven blog posts, which we'll talk about here, but they don't think about the boring stuff, the quote unquote boring stuff, right? B2B type things. So if you were providing advice for someone that says, hey, I love writing, I want to go into it, maybe I don't know what I want to do yet, what advice would you give them? Because obviously journalism's changing, corporate blogs, corporate writing is changing, even landing page copy is changing based on technologies and just consumers. So what advice would you throw out there for someone?
Well, there's a concept I sometimes talk about, which I call the blue-collar creative, where for writers, we think about novelists and people who get an article in National Geographic. For singers, we think about, Axl Rose, right? For painters, we think about Picasso, or I don't actually know much about art, but we think about those big, the big celebrity artists, the big celebrity creatives. But in every single one of those professions, there's a good middle-class living to be made by not doing the glamorous stuff, by doing illustrations for books and magazines, by writing ad copy and ghostwriting, by creating art that gets hung in public spaces. And grabbing hold of that as the way to make your living while you are practicing and improving your craft, and maybe one day you'll get the lottery ticket, maybe one day you won't, but at the same time, you'll be able to create. And so looking for those opportunities. Now, right now, we've mentioned AI once already. It's trickier because a lot of people are hiring AI to write blog posts. And the ad copy, the place where normally for many years, that's where we would have broken in. But I really think that within the next year, that bubble's going to break. Because I don't know about you, but if you've ever gone and asked ChatGPT to write 1,000 words about a topic you're familiar with, have you ever done that?
I do. Almost daily.
Yeah, so you know how many mistakes it makes.
Yeah.
Right? And so I'm assuming it's making the same number of mistakes on topics I'm not familiar with. And already I've got 2 clients who what they do is that, they go spin 100 articles on a topic about safety, which is something I'm very familiar with. And then they hire me to just go through it and make it better text and error-free. And so that is a entry that some folks will be able to have. And of course, it's always been true that people hire and buy your words, but usually they buy you. I mean, you think about the last book you read, unless it came a new author that was recommended by a friend, you're buying the most recent book by author you can trust to give you the reading experience you want. And for businesses, I get recurring business from ghostwriting clients, corporate clients, because I've shown them over the last 10 years that I already do a better job than AI. So I think short version there will be opportunities. You just need to chase them out and then just be excellent at it. And because there are very few freelance writers who can reliably turn in excellent copy without whining when asked for editorial changes, that once you get one or two satisfied customers, other customers will come.
Do you think you can make I don't want to say comfortable living, but I'm going to go back. If someone coming out of college maybe don't have clients yet, I mean, they could do freelance when they're in college, but again, sourcing the first client or two is always the most difficult. And then you could do the referrals like you talked about.
Mm-hmm.
So say someone's coming out of college, they don't really have a book of business, and then they've got to convince someone, hey, I'm the person for you because I've got a college degree, but I don't really have any work experience. Would your advice be to try to get some sort of corporate job in, entry level content marketing type job or some sort of entry level editor job somewhere, and then kind of build that, use the connections there to branch out? Or is it feasible that someone can come out of college and be like, hey, I can do this full time? Might not be getting rich, but you could do it full time right out of school.
It would be very difficult to get that book of business built inside of 6 months. It's possible, but tricky. What I'd recommend, though, is not a corporate job, but get a job where you've got some ample idle time, like graveyard shift door rattling security, or night auditor at a hotel. Brandon Sanderson, whose name is familiar to most writers, he's a extraordinarily popular fantasy writer who kickstarted 4 books a few years ago for $42 million. I mean, he's very well known. He got his start by working as a night auditor at a hotel, got his duties done in about 2 hours of an 8-hour shift, and then wrote for the next 6 hours. Yeah. And so there are jobs like that out there. And if you can get that kind of job, you can spend a few hours doing the job, earning your paycheck, and the rest of those hours working on your craft. And whether that's literally writing a blog post for a restaurant down the street, or hunting for clients, or working on your great American novel, or what have you. The thing that I would recommend that I wish I had done is find those jobs that'll feed you, that don't take so much of your energy away from writing that you go years without writing.
Makes sense. So let's talk about kind of the life of a freelance writer now. So walk us through what a typical week might look like. How many projects are you typically working on? How quickly do you turn them around? Is it a constant whack-a-mole type thing? Or I know you're able to balance your workload a bit more based on lifestyle and things like that. For someone who's younger, maybe don't have kid restrictions, maybe even spouse restrictions, or challenges there. Walk us through what a typical week might look like.
So that's going to change a great deal. Like these days, I've kind of found for the last couple of years, I've been doing mostly book-length ghostwriting projects or book-length projects in the tabletop role-playing game industry. So I'll be 1 or 2 projects at a time. And usually I'll wake up, get my kid out the door, get a little workout in, work for 2-3 hours on the heavy lifting, the heavy mental lifting, take a break, and then do admin kind of stuff for a couple hours, and then one more dive into the deep writing before the kid comes home and I do my thing. And right now, like I said, that's usually on 1 or 2 projects. But there were years back when content mills were a thing, where I would be writing 10 articles a day, 500, 600 words each, and just banging those out for like $50 a piece. But you do that math, and it's not a bad living. Now, that model has gone away, but other models are constantly bubbling up. So the biggest thing is that regardless of whether I'm doing 1 project or 10 projects, splitting up the day where I know that I do my best work. Like my brain fires the best between about 9 a.m. and 1 p.m. And then I get another little spike just before dinner. And I know better than to try to write good words at 2 in the afternoon. So that works for me. Other people have their own clock, but managing your day so that you're writing when you're the most awake and doing other stuff. And then, of course, also making sure you spend at least a couple hours a day looking for your next client.
Makes sense. can you be successful in this field if you like writing but are not great at it? Right. So to give you an example, what I mean by that is like, I write a lot for work now, have for years. Not something I ever thought I would enjoy. Not something, there's days I don't like it whatsoever, but not something I studied in school, right? So took your basic class, you kind of move on, studied something else. And it's something that repetition, had good mentors that kind of taught me, editing and stuff like that, but it's not a natural suit for me. If I look at myself, 25 years ago, 30, based on what level of education I'm going into, uh, I would have looked at it and go, no way I would do this for a living, right? Just not my repertoire because I'm not strong at it. I'm good at it, but I'm not strong at it. If you're like that, can you be successful being a good writer, but not a great writer, but you have the ability to learn? Or do you have to be pretty proficient at a young age or would be like, hey, you could be good, you could be moderately successful, but if you're really, you need to be really proficient to be super successful at this. Does that, the way I frame that, make any sense, Jason?
Absolutely. And if you're a B to B plus writer, you'll be fine. I mean, I think all of us can think back to something that somebody clearly paid somebody to write, and you're reading it wondering what on earth is happening here.
Sometimes they're reading my stuff.
I do some editing as well, and every once in a while I'll actually get angry about it. It's like, somebody paid for this. And so being a reasonably good writer is fine. The skills that will make you stand out are actually your people skills, your time management skills, and your willingness to market yourself. And I think that goes all the way up to novel writers for big 5 publishing companies. Because like we've all seen Danielle Steele. She makes millions of dollars a year.
How's the competition in the field?
It depends. For example, tabletop role playing, where I do a lot of my writing, the competition there is ferocious because it's a nerd hobby. A lot of people like to write. A lot of people think they can write. So the competition there is ferocious. One of the places that is actually fairly easy to break in is in most hobby magazines and websites. Like you walk into any hobby shop, doesn't matter what the hobby is. There next to the desk, there's a little rack with 3 or 4 magazines that serve that hobby, whether it's quilting or parkour. Those magazines are desperate for writers who can actually string a sentence together. So if you're a person who knows about the hobby and can write, it's pretty easy to break into those magazines. See also trade magazines for whatever your current profession is. And again, those authors are usually chosen because of their position in the industry, not for the writing skills. So if you have both, you can break in. And some of those are very well funded and pay a shocking amount of money considering.
Okay. How about salary expectations? So I know salary is going to be a little bit wonky because it's not a salary position, right? So you're doing per project, but maybe just give kind of a ballpark on some of the key things like blog posts or white papers or maybe it's a word count type thing. What should people realistically be looking at?
So you're going to be all over the place, but around 10 cents a word is pretty easy to get. And so you think about that for a 1,200 word blog post, $120. Once you get going, you can usually write one of those in an hour. So you're looking to bill about $100 an hour. But what I will say is never, ever, ever bill by the hour.
Okay.
Because most customers, I write 2,000 words an hour most of the time. If a restaurant down the street wanted me to do a blog post for them, a recipe blog post for them of 1,200 words, and I told them I'm going to bill them $200 an hour, they're going to say no way. But a reasonable market value for a well-written blog post is about $120, $150, which I can knock off in half an hour. And most writers will be able to write at that speed once they find their groove.
Okay.
So always bill by the gig. 10 cents, 20 cents. I've had gigs that were paying $1 a word. It really depends, but it is all over the place, unfortunately.
So you mentioned before that you sometimes do some editing, you read stuff and you kind of cringe at it, being like, hey, someone wrote this. And one of the things I just see in my industry is writing, it's not a I don't know, it's not a dying skill, but
Mm.
it's not a cool thing, like the quote unquote cool thing when you're in school anymore, right? So everyone's typing more now, which kind of pros and cons, but it does take away from some of that creative writing, at least pen to paper. I think just developmental wise, pen to paper is a good tool, but they're also distracted a lot more. So they're doing less writing, more picture uploading. And I think just by nature of it, my sense is that the skill of quality writing is coming down. It's hard to find really good writers. It's just observation I'm seeing. But now we have AI, right? So you can do ChatGPT or Claude or whatever you want to do. You can have it spit something out. You can edit it. Again, to your point, dichotomy, if you're not a good writer, not a good editor, and how do you edit something that you don't know anything about? But the other side to it is it takes a lot of that creativity away, right?
Yeah.
So, hey, how do I get started? How do I close this? Can you refine this paragraph? So you lose some of that muscle memory as well. So it's a long way, Jason, for me to ask you, do you have a fear that with maybe not the fear, but with all the technology, it's harder for people to really grasp the skills they need to be proficient writers? Or do you think the ones that want to be it will be it? They'll find a way.
Mostly the latter. I think the people who want
Yeah.
to be good writers, they're still people who like to write are still writing. They're still writing their stories. NaNoWriMo, that's this Write a Novel in November month event that's been going on for 10 years. It has more people signing up every year. I'm actually married to a literary agent, and the volume and quality of queries coming at her hasn't seemed to have dropped since AI became big.
Okay.
People who love to write will always find an excuse to write. So I'm not too worried about that. What I'm more worried about is my own compass for what is good writing is going to be more and more off from what people want to read as I get older and crankier.
Have you had to change the way you write? Like, do you have to write shorter sentences than you normally used to? Like, walk us through kind of the evolution you've gone through.
The biggest one for me was moving from academic writing to writing that people actually want to read. I think that's a real hazard of going to college, which you should do. But you're going to be taught to write in one fashion there, and then the writing the market demands is very, very different. I am noticing that shorter sentences, shorter forms are becoming more and more in demand. The corporate blogging gig, for instance, was for a while there, it was as many as possible at 500 words or less. And then it was going up to like 3,000 or 4,000 words a piece. And now it's back down to about 1,200 words. And it just, as the market Cold War with Google's algorithms keeps evolving. And one of the things that kind of worries me is it seems like content of all sorts is much more interested in what Meta and Google want to see than what the readers want to actually read.
Yeah.
And that's an episode of Black Mirror waiting to happen.
So you said 3,000 to 4,000 words, and I'm just thinking there's nothing more soul crushing. Well, a few things more soul crushing than writing something no one will ever read, right? Because if you just think about it for people that maybe are unfamiliar, think about going looking for a recipe online. You get to the recipe and you go through 3,000 to 4,000 words about how the recipe was there right before you get to the recipe. That's kind of like every blog post for 7 years, to your point, up until relatively recently. So it's soul crushing writing something is no one's going to see.
That is a point that I make sometimes when I speak at writers' conventions about this kind of thing, and about it only is soul crushing if you're still attached to your words. One of the biggest, I have some fiction projects I'm very attached to. I have a nonfiction project I'm very attached to. But if American Express wants to pay me to write a blog post for them, I don't care about the words once they come out. You're exchanging a service for goods.
Okay.
And if nobody reads that, my goal there wasn't to become famous for writing a small business advice for American Express. My goal was to feed my family without getting out of my chair. And that also applies to taking editorial feedback, which is one of the biggest hurdles I've seen in authors that I've mentored. That to be less sentimental about your words than we are often, than is I think our reflex as people who love to write.
It's a good concept of reframing it, right, to a profession side versus a love of content side.
Yeah. Like
I like that.
my novel that's close to my heart, I die if nobody ever read it. And people have read it, and most of them seem to like it, right? But if you're just doing your craftsmanship writing, nah, you're writing to get paid. You're not writing to get read.
There you go. How about things in the field? Like someone goes into this as a career that either no one will tell you, or people kind of go into it and then they get surprised by it. They're like, "Oh, I didn't know X, Y, Z." Or is there anything you can point to?
Well, there's a couple things that are, I think, important. One's a kind of funny, silly story that I'll tell on myself. On the martial arts industry, maybe ironically, it's very, very huggy. We hug people all the time. I can't explain it, but there it is. The writing industry is not huggy. And if you're a large middle-aged man going around hugging writers for no real reason, you get pulled over by a friend of yours going, dude, you're creeping everybody out. What the hell? So if you come from a huggy culture, just know that writing journalism are less physical. But more seriously, a couple of the big ones are one, the importance of having, before you get into writing, done something you sucked at and then improved upon. There was this conference I was at, this was 10, 15 years ago now, where I was presenting, and I was at the table with the other presenters. There were about a dozen of us. 3 of us were men. Turned out all 3 of us had wrestled in high school and college. Asked everybody else at the table, and all but one of them had been either an athlete or a musician or in drama during school. And what we kind of gathered from that, and over those 10 years, I've been asking around, doing a completely unscientific study of it. When you're an athlete or you're a musician or you're in drama, you are told over and over and over again, hey, you did that wrong, do better. And there's no drama about that, no pun intended. It's just part of the process. But if you're just an academic, I don't want to see just as in you're lower than, but if your only experience as a child is in academics, that 99.9% you got on the math test, you feel a little bad about the 0.1. And you can never go back and fix it. And building that muscle of being told, hey, fix this, without getting upset about it, is a hugely important part of moving into writing as a professional. Because so many people come in and get those editorial feedbacks or that one-star review on Amazon, and it just wrecks their day. And so just being prepared for constructive feedback. And if you haven't had experience with constructive feedback, go learn a new hobby.
Constructive feedback is one of the things that keeps showing up on these interviews that we're doing. And I think it's probably a lost skill, not even a skill. It's a lost kind of attribute, right? It's pretty quick. I don't know. I don't even know how to
I would say skill because it's learnable.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but that keeps showing up. So it's a really good thing you mentioned there. Question about writer's block for you. Yeah. So when you get writer's block, how do you snap out of it?
Writer's block doesn't exist. Fear exists, procrastination exists, exhaustion exists, burnout exists. I just don't want to certainly exist. I suffer from that at least once a week. There's an author named Robert B. Parker, for folks my age and older who might remember the TV show Spencer for Hire. He wrote the detective novels that was based on. He was in an interview where he was asked about his writing habits, and what he says, he gets up, he has breakfast, he works out, then he writes 5 pages. Sometimes he's done by lunch, sometimes he's done at midnight. He just sits his butt down and writes 5 pages. The woman asked him, hey, but what about writer's block? And his response was, I am a professional writer. Has your plumber ever canceled an appointment because he had plumber's block? If you're a professional, the difference between an amateur and a professional is the professional does it when they don't feel like doing it. And that's a little, maybe a little tongue-in-cheek, maybe a little insensitive. But to answer your question, when I feel like I don't want to do it, what do I do to do it anyway? And the answer to that is, for me at least, I have 2. One is a quick, silly hack, and one is more serious. The more serious one is I just change modalities. If I'm having trouble working on project A, I shift over to project B. If I'm having trouble working at my desk, I grab my laptop and go out onto the patio. If I'm having trouble working at my laptop, I go do something on a notebook. when any kind of shift like that often helps immensely. Worst case scenario, I'll take a 20-minute walk thinking about it, come back, sit down and write.
Okay.
The other hack type things, there's two of them. One is, I call it the at-hat because I'm a Star Wars geek, where if I get stuck even for more than 20 seconds on a word or a concept, I just type 2 at symbols and maintain my momentum and keep going. And then later on in the process, I'll do a find replace for 2 adjacent at symbols and then replace and then fill those in. Because that lost momentum is often what people mistake for writer's block, where you get stuck at that, or something you have to stop and go look up. And then the other one, carry on.
Oh, I was going to say, I'm going to steal that one because every now and then I get stuck either on a transition or I just have a tough time trying to find an open to it. And I'll use, ChatGPT, but usually it's not helping me out there.
Yeah.
I do the change in modality, right? I will get up and I'll go out to the deck or downstairs and just sit somewhere else. But sometimes I get stuck there. I move and I'm like, I'm in the same place, right? And sometimes I'll go to like email or I'll do something else there. But I'm going to try the at because there are times where you're kind of in a flow and I'm like, I have no idea how to make this transition right here. So,
and I used to do XX. I used to do XX, but then I started working in the tabletop role-playing game industry. I would not believe how many people and places have names with 2 adjacent X's in them in that field. So it's at now.
That's fair.
But that works. And I've done so much as, writing fiction and get to, there's a fight scene, but I'm just not feeling the fight scene. So at, great big fight, and then just keep moving. Another one akin to that is if you have set writing times, say, especially when you're breaking in and you're going to write for an hour before dinner. Your timer goes off and you're really tempted to finish the sentence, right? Don't finish the sentence. Because half a writer's block is when we sit down to start writing, we're not sure what we're going to type first. We can spend like 10 minutes just staring at the page going, "Urgh." But if you leave the sentence from the previous night unfinished, it's been bugging you for 24 hours and you know exactly what you're going to write. And it's amazing how much that half a sentence establishes the momentum that you can ride for the rest of your writing session.
Makes sense.
It will hurt your feelings the first 100 times you do it.
Only 100 though, right?
Yeah.
Jason, you've written a lot of stuff, right? So we kind of talked about it. You mentioned you've written books. What's your favorite thing to write?
So my favorite things to write, there's 2 really. There's one is in the martial arts safety and self-protection sphere. Got a project now called Safest Family on the Block. The book dropped 2 weeks ago about just advice for parents to keep their kids safe. Everything from crime prevention to stocking a first aid kit to mental health that I got by interviewing a bunch of experts in every safety related topic I could find. And I love writing in that because it's close to my heart as a martial artist and close to my heart as a father. Other than that, I do love writing in the tabletop role-playing game industry. It pays a little less than a lot of other fields, but it's been my hobby since I was 10. And I just absolutely adore it.
Excellent. What's your least favorite thing to write?
Least favorite thing to write is yet another personal finance or small business advice blog post. Not because I don't find that stuff fascinating, but because I've written probably 6,000 of those at this point, and I'm just tired of it. But it pays well, which is why I've written 6,000 of them. So,
how about, what would you say the most challenging part of a career as a freelance writer is?
So, a couple of them. One is a lot of people have found that the money is in ghostwriting. Because it just is. You can get fairly large paydays for single projects. But actually, this is true of writing in general. The number of skills that aren't writing that you need to have at least a passing proficiency with to succeed. Like with the ghostwriting in particular, you've got to know psychology and communication, motivation. You need to know how to tell somebody who wants their name on a book, but doesn't want to be the one to have written the book, and help guide somebody with that particular kind of mindset through a process that you know more about than they do, which can be very, very challenging. Outside of ghostwriting, just the business management, the time management, the project management, the marketing and advertising and networking skills all of these are aspects that most of us didn't sign up to write to have to do.
And then flip side to that, what do you find to be the most rewarding part?
The most rewarding part is when I hear somebody tell me that an article I wrote helped them in some way. And also the fact that I can be with my family when I want to be with my family. There was I wrote a series of articles about mental health for healthline.com about some mental health challenges my former wife and I had together. And about once or twice a year, I'll get an email or a Facebook message from somebody thanking me for that and about how they were able to keep their marriage together because they followed that advice, which is really nice.
Oh, how nice.
Yeah. And then also, I'm always, when my kid gets home at 4 this afternoon, I'll be there. When my kids were babies, I was there to hang out with them,
As we start to wind down, Jason,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go back. You've probably given this answer across the board. I could pick out a few things you've already given already, but I want to consolidate it just a little bit here. So, like direct advice for students, could be high school, could be college, who are going into or want to or think they want to go into some sort of career with a writing discipline. What immediate advice would you offer to them?
Submit early. Submit before you think you're ready. And that can be to your college paper. That can be to, well, not National Geographic because they don't do open submissions, but that can be to a major newspaper website. They don't know how old you are. They don't care how old you are as long as the words are good. If you got a good idea, put it out there. And you might win the lottery on it. You might get a gig right out the gate. You probably won't, but what you will do is if you do it enough, you'll get some advice from a seasoned professional who not only says no thank you to your article, but says why. And that advice is the best advice you can get. And so submit as early as you can and submit higher up the flagpole than you think you're ready for. Like a lot of people think I'll do a local magazine this week and a regional magazine next year and then a national magazine the year after that. No, go for the big ones. They can't tell you super duper extra double dog no. They're not going to keep a blacklist that you were too big for your britches. So just, submit early, submit often.
Excellent. Love the advice. Jason, anything I maybe neglected to ask you that would be important for the audience to know?
No, I don't think so. Just, keep at, start earlier than you think you're ready to start. Pay attention. Listen to the advice they have. One last thing, stay friends with at least one X. Because if you're starting to do your own work, you're going to need good beta readers. Those are people who read your novel before you send it out there. And a good X who's friends with you cares about you, but doesn't care at all about pissing you off. And they will give you the most honest feedback about your books of anybody, anywhere.
Good advice. I guess you just have to be nice to them, right?
I know, right? I know that's tough, but...
Yeah. Very good. I don't know if there is a go-to one for you, Jason, but you can think of either now or maybe back, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, if it's still around. But do you have any favorite educational resources in the writing field that you either refer to or you refer other people to?
So that's kind of tough right now because the stuff I read when I broke in my first paid gig was in the 90s. The technology and process has changed so significantly since then that almost none of that advice applies anymore. There's a woman named Carol Tice who's, if you Google Carol Tice, she's got a brand named website that is not caroltice.com, who has some excellent workshops and programs for people breaking into freelance writing. Just Google Carol Tice, you'll find it. And
awesome.
And then if you're looking more at being a novelist, there's a program called 20 Books to 50K, which is good for self-published works. And then the works of Larry Brooks is good for people who are just dead set on big 5 traditional publication deals.
Very good. Do you have a favorite author, by the way? I didn't ask you this. But...
So favorite author ever is Joe Steinbeck. John Steinbeck. Favorite author currently writing is Joe Lansdale.
Okay.
And for nonfiction, David Quammen.
Excellent. Well, Jason, thanks for your time today. If someone wants to reach out, ask any questions, is there a preferred way for them to get a hold of you?
Sure thing. You can find me on Facebook. There's about 6 Jason Bricks. I'm the only one who's routinely talking about heavy metal and tabletop role-playing games. So
Awesome. Favorite heavy metal band?
right now, Bloodywood.
Okay.
They're a folk metal band out of New Delhi that are operating today, and they're just fantastic. Long-term Iron Maiden.
Okay. Awesome. How many times have you seen them?
Maiden? Half
Yeah.
a dozen.
Okay. Very good. I was just talking to my kids. I was exposing my kids to Metallica, I don't know, 3
Nice.
weeks ago. I've been trying to throw something in from the 90s or 80s based on what it is
Yeah.
when I pick them up from school. So I force them to listen to something to expose them. So
You're getting that education in. Yeah, both my kids, by the time they were 14, could tell the difference between Slayer, Metallica, Megadeth, and Anthrax. Because, we got to keep that education rolling.
I figure Metallica is the easy way before we
Yeah.
get to the Slayer side of stuff. So
It's the gateway
very
drug.
good. All right, very good. Jason
Excellent.
Brick, everyone. Hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. If you want to explore other careers or share your career with us, please check out our website. Until next time, be good, do good, God bless. Go Bills.
Unboxing careers,